Call the member for Mildura.
Thank you, Assistant Speaker. I rise today to weigh in on this debate about the Mental Health and Wellbeing Bill 2023. And I'd like to start by acknowledging those that we've lost through mental health challenges and suicide. I've been to far too many funerals, and the fact that we're here today discussing mental health reform is really significant for people in my community who have, for want of a better phrase, really, particularly over the last 20, 30 years and before that, before the term mental health and mental illness was something that we spoke about as openly as we are right now, which is a good thing. Small rural communities have really been through the ringer. It's been an epidemic until recent times. It is something that my family and I have very extensive lived experience in, which is why I am such a passionate advocate for and within the mental health space. And this is a journey. I'm going to take you on a journey while I speak about this bill, which might illustrate why I am of the opinion that it shouldn't be either a health response or a police-led response. It can't be either. It needs to be a case-by-case response. Everyone is different. We know that. Everyone's challenges are very, very different. They might be have the same broad diagnosis, if you like, but everyone is so very different, and the response should be different. And based on what the experts, if there is the luxury of having experts involved in the case, what they determined. Like I said, my lived experience is extensive, and some might say traumatic, but I'll continue to talk about it. I'll continue to advocate for those that have had challenges and for those who care for those who have challenges. I see you, I hear you. It's a really tough gig, and my experience is on both sides of the coin as a carer and as a patient that's been through the system in a previous life, but again, a very different sort of case after being a physiological response to chemical poisoning. And this is, it can be polarising to talk about, but some of the feedback that I get on a regular basis is that especially young people at school, young people in their early 20s particularly, and particularly men, want to hear leaders talk more openly about their lived experience in this space. So I'm happy to. I'm an open book when it comes to all of this, but I've only got, 6 minutes left. So if you want to talk more about it, then I have an open door policy. But I have no reservations in talking about this, and this comes from my husband, who very publicly in 2020 started speaking about his struggles with depression, which had been a chronic condition since he was a teenager, and wanted to do something about it because the response in our part of the world wasn't adequate for his experience. So he decided that he would actually do something about it and put into place a project that led to him running a marathon during COVID, so he had to do it alone. But he was very, very brave, raised $50,000, and now that was to establish a walk-in clinic that didn't need an appointment, it didn't need a referral, it didn't need Medicare. It was just somewhere that people that were having a crisis could go then when they needed it, not 6 weeks down the track when everything has changed. So that's where my bravery come from. And that walk-in clinic is still there at Robinvale District Health Services, so it has led to drastic change. And he's one of the reasons I'll forever advocate for mental health reform. So I am very grateful actually to be able to speak on this bill today. And we've come a long way for me to be able to stand here today and for him to be able to speak about it 3 years ago. My first experience was in year 10 in the 90s, in the early 90s. And it was then a classmate had taken his own life, and the silence around that event was deafening. It was, this has happened, there was an assembly, and the silence post was deafening. And then, a few years down the track, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but further down the track, a former partner of mine with the gift of 2020 hindsight then, but in the late 90s, again, Beyond Blue didn't exist. We didn't use the term mental health or mental illness the way we do now. We didn't even use the word bipolar. It was you were manic or you were depressed. Clearly there was a need for a response then, and that actually led to a police response in the end. Very different to some of the other experiences that I've had. But, these stories go on, and I could talk about the whole journey for hours. And, I've been to too many funerals to remain silent about this. But it does come down to mental health reform, obviously, and we support the recommendations of the Royal Commission, obviously, but the response needs to be, it can't be exclusively police, it can't be exclusively a health-led response, because they are very, very different. For example, my former partner, that absolutely in the end it needed to be, maybe previous to that, if there were experts involved, it could have been a health-led response. In the end, it needed to be a police-led response because of what it ended up being. But we have come a long way, and I think it's important now when we are debating bills such as this and mental health reform that we can take it and consider these bills in detail, so we make sure we have come a long way, but we need to make sure we are getting it right and approach it with a very broad lens. It doesn't matter how flat you make a pancake, there is always two sides. So we need to be able to be respectful in these debates and consider them, all of these clauses in detail, and make sure that one clause or two clauses don't cancel out one that would be more appropriate. Is it a case of removing two clauses and letting it be a response one way or the other? Like I said, locally now we've come a long way. We have the drop-in clinic, which is still running at RDHS, which is fantastic. We do struggle with qualified staff though, especially in rural and regional areas. It's hard to find the right staff. And the stigma is becoming less and less. And I am often asked, to keep talking about it, to remove that stigma that still does exist. And currently at the moment, my team and I are raising money for Lifeline Loddon Mallee, and more specifically the Sunraysia Lifeline project, which Stephen Hedgedus and his amazing team worked on for a long, long time to get a local Lifeline call centre up and running at the Irimple Library. So over the course of this week, it is the final week. I've done 2,500 push-ups since the beginning of June. If you see me on the floor, it is not because, well, it might be because I'm tired, but if I am on the floor, it's because I'm doing push-ups. Feel free to make a donation. I'm about $100 short of my target, but happy to go above and beyond that. It is for a really good cause. Feel free to jump down and do some push-ups with me. That'd be great. I could take care of them all in a split. In fact, our leader, member for Murray Plains, I didn't even ask him in advance, but I did see him in the passageway before and said, how about it, get down and give me 10, and he did. So that's leadership for you, folks. Look, it has been a journey. I appreciate being able to discuss this in here, and I appreciate being able to talk about, these experiences and to be able to, in this place, hopefully contribute to legislation from a lived experience perspective, I think is really important, and it is the best way forward. So I hope it is something that we continue to talk about, and make sure that you donate to the push-up challenge. It's got 1 week to go. You can find QR codes and things on my office door. Thanks.